Hello, everyone. It's Jeff, and I would like to tell you a story today about a man whose name traveled all around the world. In fact, it actually traveled beyond the earth.
Today's video is sponsored by Heart of the Tribe Gallery, where art meets community. More about that later.
It all started on the 26th of September, 1902, when in Boston, Massachusetts, a young man was born. His name was James. James was too young to fight in World War I. In World War II, he worked for the 4 shipyards in Quincy, Massachusetts. His job was a simple one. He was a rivet inspector. He would not only inspect each rivet in the ships to make sure that they were tight and they were exactly where they were supposed to be, but he would also count the number of rivets, because members of the riveting crew at that shipyard was paid by the number of rivets that they put in each shift. He worked on some of the most epic ships of World War II, including the very first aircraft carrier, the USS Lexington. He was a very conscientious worker and was known to do his job very well. He cared whether the rivets were correctly placed in the ships and whether they were tight, because he knew that these ships would be needed for battle. The Fore River Shipyard built a great number of ships during the Second World War. And in James's job, at the end of his shift, all of the rivets that he had checked and counted, he would draw a line on the wall and he would put his initials. And he would turn those numbers into payroll. Well, the riveters soon learned that they could erase his initials and the line and move it back so that they could increase their paychecks. Well, an audit was performed, and they found out that they were paying for twice the number of rivets that were actually driven in the ship's hulls. And James was called to task on it. And he decided that the way to change it was to use a different mark with a different style of crayon that would be difficult or impossible for the other riveters to erase. This was taken while the ship that they were building under the crane was the USS Salem. They found a style of crayon, a kind of crayon, that was very difficult for the men to erase. And he decided that from there on out, he would draw his line and he would put his last name, and then he would write "was here," so that the next person coming on shift would know exactly where he stopped and would have his name, and the mark would be bigger, and it would be drawn with a particular kind of crayon that was difficult to erase. And it worked very, very well. These ships were built very quickly, and after they were built, they were loaded to the brim with soldiers headed to England for the war. Because the war was raging and material was in short supply, oftentimes these ships sailed with James's name emblazoned over a great deal of the ship. His marks and marks of other people were all over these ships, but in particular James's mark, because James was a very hard-working man, and he was very conscientious, and he made his marks large throughout those ships, and they were seen by thousands and thousands and thousands of soldiers. James's last name was Kilroy, and the mark that covered these ships that the soldiers and sailors saw every day was "Kilroy was here." When the soldiers left these ships, they took Kilroy with them and emblazoned it everywhere they went. Hitler believed that Kilroy was a super spy and that these images were left behind to mock the German soldiers. Stalin found his outhouse at one of the places he was staying emblazoned with a Kilroy. Kilroy was everywhere. But the story doesn't end there, because this gentleman was a cartoonist in England during World War II. His name was George Edward Chatterton, and he is responsible, probably more than anyone else, of Kilroy being emblazoned basically around the world, because he kind of took the ball and ran with it. It was him who included Kilroy in his cartoons. In 1946, James Kilroy was quietly living in Quincy, Massachusetts, when the Boston Transit Authority decided to hold a contest. They wanted to know where the Kilroy phenomena started. They wanted to know who Kilroy was. 46 people wrote letters to the Transit Authority saying that they were the person that had started the phenomena. But it was James Kilroy and his children who wrote a letter that convinced the Transit Authority that he was the one, when he told the story about working in the shipyard and had pictures of the ships with "Kilroy was here" written on the sides of the bulkheads. The prize for the contest was a brand new streetcar, which James Kilroy placed in his front yard, and for years and years and years, his children played in it. During the Apollo moon landings, one of the astronauts drew a Kilroy in the dust on the surface of the moon. James is buried in a quiet cemetery at the end of a county road, somewhat forgotten in history. And now you know all of the story of James Kilroy. Remember, everybody, be good to each other, do good deeds, think good thoughts, and I will see you on another adventure. I would like to express thanks for ideas and story-building help from The Wandering Ponderer, someone I respect and admire very much. Be sure and check out his channel, The Wandering Ponderer.
The Heart of the Tribe Gallery is a community art gallery situated near the top of Glastonbury High Street. They host amazing exhibitions supporting local artists, and they have a beautiful secret garden out the back. So be sure to check them out and support local art.